Richard Williams pulled out his phone, his hands shaking as he scrolled through his recent calls. "Look, here it is," he said, showing Catherine the screen. "Unknown number, called at 1:45 p.m. The woman said she was calling from St. Mary's Hospital emergency room." Catherine stared at the phone, her confusion deepening. "But I haven't been to any hospital today. I've been here since noon, waiting for lunch with Patricia Morgan from the charity committee." Mr. Peterson stepped forward, sensing the growing tension. "Sir, perhaps we should move this conversation to somewhere more private. My office is available if you need." "No," Richard interrupted, his voice tight with stress. "Something's not right here." The caller knew Catherine's full name, knew she was pregnant, even knew her due date. She said Catherine was asking for me specifically and that there might be complications with the baby. Maria watched this exchange with growing unease. She had been so focused on the confrontation with Catherine that she had barely noticed anything else happening around them. But now, looking at the panic in Richard's eyes and the genuine confusion on Catherine's face, she realized they were dealing with something much bigger than their shared past. "What exactly did the caller say?" Maria asked, surprising everyone by inserting herself into the conversation. Richard looked at her with annoyance. "And you are?" "This is Maria," Mr. Peterson explained quickly. "She's one of our servers. There was an incident with spilled wine, but I think we should focus on—" "The wine doesn't matter right now," Richard snapped. "Someone called pretending to be from a hospital, claiming my pregnant wife was in emergency surgery. Do you understand how serious that is?" Catherine was silent, her face pale as she processed what was happening. "Richard, who else knows I'm eating lunch here today? Who would even know to call you about me being at a hospital?" "That's what I want to know," Richard replied grimly. He turned to Mr. Peterson. "Do you have security cameras in here? I want to see who's been watching my wife." Mr. Peterson nodded nervously. "Yes, we have cameras throughout the restaurant. I can pull the footage from today if you think it would help." As they spoke, Maria noticed a well-dressed woman entering the restaurant. She recognized her immediately, Patricia Morgan, the charity committee member Catherine had been waiting for. Patricia looked around the dining room with obvious concern, taking in the scene of Catherine in her stained dress, surrounded by her agitated husband, the restaurant manager, and a waitress. "Catherine," Patricia called out, hurrying over. "What's going on here? I'm so sorry I'm late, but I got the strangest phone call about you being in the hospital." The group fell silent. Richard's face went even paler. "You got a call too?" Patricia nodded, pulling out her own phone. "About 20 minutes ago, a woman claiming to be a nurse said you'd been brought to the emergency room after collapsing at lunch. She said you were asking for your husband and asking for me to come to the hospital immediately." Catherine sank back into her chair, her hands trembling. "This doesn't make sense. Why would someone do this? What do they want?" Maria felt a chill run down her spine. She looked around the restaurant, studying the other diners more carefully. Most seemed absorbed in their own conversations, but there was something about the atmosphere that felt off, like they were being watched. "Has anyone else been asking about Mrs. Williams today?" Maria asked Mr. Peterson. "Any unusual phone calls to the restaurant? Anyone asking when she usually comes in?" Mr. Peterson frowned, thinking. "Actually, yes. This morning someone called asking about our lunch reservations. They wanted to know if Catherine Williams had a table booked for today. I thought it was odd because they claimed to be from her doctor's office, but they didn't sound very professional." Richard's face darkened. Someone's been tracking Catherine's movements. They knew she'd be here. They knew who she was meeting with, and they had both of our phone numbers. "But why?" Catherine asked, her voice small and frightened. "What could anyone possibly want with me? I'm nobody special." Maria almost laughed at that statement, given what she knew about Catherine's entitled attitude. But the fear in the other woman's voice was genuine. Whatever was happening, Catherine was as much a victim as anyone else. "Mrs. Williams," Maria said carefully, "have you received any strange calls lately? Any unusual letters or emails? Anyone following you or watching your house?" Catherine shook her head. "No, nothing like that. My life is completely routine. I go to charity meetings, doctor appointments, shopping. I don't have any enemies, or wait." She stopped mid-sentence, her eyes widening as if remembering something important. "What is it?" Richard demanded. "Last week," Catherine said slowly, "when I was leaving Dr. Martinez's office, there was a woman in the parking lot. She was sitting in her car, but she seemed to be watching me. When I walked past, she quickly looked away and started her car. I thought it was odd at the time, but I dismissed it. Can you describe her? Maria asked. Middle-aged, maybe late 40s. Brown hair, average height. She was driving a dark blue sedan, nothing fancy. But there was something about the way she looked at me. It felt personal, if that makes sense. Patricia spoke up. Catherine, you never mentioned any of this to me. Have there been other incidents? Catherine thought for a moment. There have been some strange things, but I didn't connect them. Wrong number calls at odd hours. Someone went through our mail. Richard noticed the mailbox had been tampered with. And our neighbor mentioned seeing someone walking around our property at night last week. Richard ran his hands through his hair. Why didn't you tell me any of this? If someone's been stalking you. I didn't think they were connected, Catherine said defensively. They seemed like random incidents. But now, Maria felt her phone buzzing in her apron pocket. She pulled it out and saw a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Important information about Catherine Williams. She stared at the message, her blood running cold. I just got a text, she said quietly. From someone who apparently knows about Mrs. Williams. Everyone turned to look at her. What does it say? Richard demanded. Maria read the message aloud. The group exchanged worried glances. Check your email? Patricia said. That's odd. How would they even have your phone number? Maria realized she would have to explain her connection to Catherine without revealing their shared history at the group home. She wasn't ready to expose that in front of Catherine's husband and friend. I'll check it, Maria said, opening her email app. There was indeed a new message from an anonymous email address. The subject line read, The Truth About Catherine. She opened the email and began reading. Her face grew pale as she absorbed the contents. What does it say? Catherine asked anxiously. Maria looked up at the group, unsure how much to reveal. The email contained detailed information about Catherine's life, her address, her husband's business, her pregnancy due date, even her social security number. But more disturbing was the personal information it contained about her past. It's detailed, Maria said carefully. Whoever sent this knows a lot about your life, Mrs. Williams. Your personal information, your daily routine, your medical details. Oh my God, Catherine whispered. Someone's been investigating me. But why? The email continued with more specific information. Catherine Mitchell Williams, formerly of Sunny Meadows Group Home, has been living a lie for 20 years. Her husband doesn't know about her time in foster care. Her charity friends don't know she was sent away for theft. She's built her entire adult life on deception. Maria's heart sank. Someone was threatening to expose Catherine's past, and they knew about the group home. But how was this connected to the phone calls about the hospital? There's more, Maria said reluctantly. The sender is threatening to reveal information about your past unless you meet certain demands. What kind of demands? Richard asked sharply. Maria continued reading. They want you to donate $50,000 to a specific charity by tomorrow, or they'll send information about your real background to your husband, your friends, and the local newspaper. Catherine's face went completely white. She looked at Richard, then at Patricia, panic evident in her eyes. What real background? Richard asked, looking confused and frustrated. Catherine, what are they talking about? Catherine opened and closed her mouth several times, unable to speak. Maria could see the terror in her eyes. Not just fear of this unknown stalker, but fear that her carefully constructed life was about to come crashing down. Catherine started, then stopped. She looked around the restaurant, aware that other diners were still watching their table with interest. We need to call the police, Patricia said firmly. This is clearly extortion and stalking. No, Catherine said quickly, too quickly. Let's think about this first. Maybe we can handle it privately. Richard stared at his wife with growing suspicion. Catherine, what aren't you telling me? What could anyone possibly know about your background that you wouldn't want me to know? We've been married for 10 years. The silence stretched between them. Maria felt awful for Catherine, despite their history. She was watching a woman's entire life potentially fall apart because of secrets from her teenage years. The email says more, Maria said quietly. They want to meet with Mrs. Williams tonight. Alone. At Riverside Park at 9 p.m. Absolutely not, Richard said immediately. Catherine is not meeting some anonymous blackmailer alone, especially while she's pregnant. But if I don't, Catherine said miserably, they'll expose everything. My life will be ruined. What everything? Richard's voice was getting louder and more frustrated. Catherine, I'm your husband. Whatever this is about, we can handle it together. But you need to tell me the truth. Catherine looked at Maria with desperate eyes, as if pleading for help. Maria found herself in an impossible position. She could expose Catherine's lies right now, get revenge for years of buried trauma and humiliation. Or she could try to help the woman who had once made her life miserable. Before she could decide, her phone buzzed with another text. This one made her blood run cold. Maria Santos. You're part of this now. If Catherine doesn't show up tonight, we'll expose your connection to her. Everyone will know about Sunny Meadows, including your current employer. Your choice. Maria stared at the phone, realizing she was no longer just a witness to this situation. She was now a target herself. Someone knew about her past, knew about the group home, and was using it as leverage against both her and Catherine. We're both being blackmailed, Maria said quietly, showing the text to the group. Catherine looked at the message and began to cry. I'm so sorry, she whispered to Maria. I never wanted you to be dragged into this. Into what? Richard demanded. Would someone please explain what's going on? What is Sunny Meadows? The moment of truth had arrived. Catherine looked at Maria, and Maria looked back at her. 20 years of secrets hung in the balance, and someone was forcing them both to face their past whether they wanted to or not. Richard, Catherine said finally, her voice barely audible. There are things about my teenage years that I never told you. Things I thought I could leave behind forever. What kind of things? Catherine took a shaky breath. When I was 15, I got in some trouble at school. My parents, they sent me away for a while. To a group home for troubled teens. Richard's face showed his shock. You told me you went to boarding school in Switzerland that year. I lied, Catherine admitted. I've been lying about it our entire relationship. I was ashamed, and I thought it didn't matter anymore. And Maria? Patricia asked, looking between the two women. How do you fit into this? Maria and Catherine looked at each other. There was so much history between them, so much pain and anger and regret. But now they were both victims of someone who wanted to use that past against them. We knew each other there, Maria said simply. At Sunny Meadows. We were both residents at the same time. The admission hung in the air. Richard sat back in his chair, processing this information. Patricia looked confused but sympathetic. Mr. Peterson seemed uncomfortable with the personal drama unfolding in his restaurant. So someone who knows about your time at this group home is blackmailing both of you? Richard asked slowly. It looks that way, Maria confirmed. But I can't understand why anyone would care about something that happened 20 years ago. Catherine wiped her tears and looked up. Unless it's someone else who was there. Someone who has a grudge against both of us. Maria's mind raced through memories of the other residents at Sunny Meadows. There had been a dozen girls there during her time, each with their own story of family trouble or behavioral issues. Most of them had faded from her memory, but a few faces remained clear. Do you remember Jessica Chin? Maria asked Catherine. Catherine's face went pale. Oh no, you don't. T. Maria Santos wiped her hands on her black apron for the third time in 10 minutes. The lunch rush at Bella Vista restaurant was in full swing, and every table in her section was occupied. She had been working double shifts for the past 2 weeks, trying to save enough money for her mother's medical bills. The treatments were expensive, and her waitressing job barely covered the basics, let alone the mounting hospital costs. The afternoon sun streamed through the large windows of the upscale restaurant, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Maria moved between tables with practiced efficiency, balancing plates and refilling water glasses. She had been working at Bella Vista for 3 years, and she knew the routine by heart. The customers were usually pleasant enough, though some could be demanding. Today felt different, though. There was a tension in the air that she couldn't quite place. At table 7, a well-dressed pregnant woman sat alone, scrolling through her phone while waiting for her lunch companion. Her designer handbag sat on the chair beside her, and her jewelry caught the light as she moved. Maria had served her before, Mrs. Catherine Williams, the wife of a prominent local businessman. She always ordered the same thing, grilled salmon with no seasoning and sparkling water with lemon. Today was no exception. Maria approached the table with a fresh bottle of red wine for the table next to Mrs. Williams. The businessman had ordered an expensive Cabernet Sauvignon to accompany his steak lunch. As Maria carefully opened the bottle and began to pour, she noticed Mrs. Williams talking loudly on her phone about some charity event she was organizing. Her voice carried across the restaurant, drawing annoyed looks from other diners. "I don't care what the caterer says," Mrs. Williams was saying. "I want white tablecloths, not cream. There's a difference, and if they can't see that, then maybe we need to find someone else who can follow simple instructions." Maria tried to focus on pouring the wine, but Mrs. Williams' voice was becoming increasingly sharp. She was berating someone on the other end of the call about flower arrangements, speaking as if the person was incompetent. Maria felt uncomfortable listening to the one-sided conversation. She had dealt with difficult customers before, but something about Mrs. Williams' tone reminded her of darker times in her own past. As Maria lifted the bottle to move to the next glass, her hand began to tremble slightly. The memories were creeping back. Memories of her stepfather's voice raised in anger, of cowering in corners while he screamed at her mother. Mrs. Williams' sharp words were triggering something deep inside her, something she had worked hard to overcome through years of therapy and determination. "No, that's completely wrong." Mrs. Williams snapped into her phone. "How hard is it to understand basic color coordination? Are you people even listening to me?" Maria's breathing became shallow. She tried to steady herself, focusing on the simple task of pouring wine. "Just finish this table and move on," she told herself. But her hands were shaking more now, and the bottle felt heavier than it should. She could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the restaurant's air conditioning. The businessman at the table smiled and nodded his thanks as Maria poured his wine. She managed a weak smile in return, but her attention kept drifting to Mrs. Williams' increasingly hostile phone conversation. The pregnant woman was now criticizing someone's intelligence, her voice dripping with disdain and superiority. "I swear, finding competent help these days is impossible," Mrs. Williams continued. "It's like they hire people who can't even follow basic instructions. Some people just aren't cut out for certain jobs, if you know what I mean." Those words hit Maria like a physical blow. It was exactly what her stepfather used to say about her mother, about her, about anyone who didn't meet his impossible standards. The bottle in Maria's hand began to shake more violently. She tried to set it down on the table, but her coordination was failing her as the panic attack took hold. Mrs. Williams looked up from her phone just as Maria's trembling hand lost its grip on the bottle. Time seemed to slow down as the expensive Cabernet Sauvignon tipped toward Mrs. Williams' white maternity dress. The deep red wine splashed across the fabric, staining it immediately. The liquid spread quickly, soaking into the expensive material and dripping onto the floor. The restaurant fell silent for a moment. Every head turned toward their table. Mrs. Williams stared down at her ruined dress in shock, her mouth open in disbelief. The wine had splashed across her prominently rounded belly, making the stain even more dramatic and visible. "Oh my God!" Mrs. Williams shrieked, jumping to her feet. "Look what you've done. This dress cost more than you make in a month." Maria stood frozen, the empty wine bottle still in her hand. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to?" Mrs. Williams' voice rose to a shout. "You completely ruined my dress. Do you have any idea how much this cost? How am I supposed to go to my appointment looking like this?" Other diners began to murmur and point. Some took out their phones, no doubt preparing to record what was quickly becoming a scene. Maria felt the familiar sensation of wanting to disappear, to sink into the floor and escape the attention and anger directed at her. "I'll pay for the cleaning," Maria offered, though she knew she couldn't afford it. "Or the replacement, I'll clean it." Mrs. Williams laughed bitterly. "This is designer. You can't just clean wine out of silk. And replacement? Please. This is a custom maternity dress. It would take weeks to replace, assuming they even could." The restaurant manager, Mr. Peterson, hurried over from across the room. He was a kind man in his 50s who had always been fair to his employees. Maria could see the concern in his eyes as he assessed the situation. "What happened here?" he asked calmly, though Maria could see the stress in his posture. "Your clumsy waitress just destroyed my dress." Mrs. Williams snapped. I want her fired immediately. This is completely unacceptable. I come here regularly, and I've never experienced such incompetence. Maria's heart sank. She needed this job desperately. Her mother's next treatment was scheduled for next week, and she was already behind on her rent. Losing her job would be devastating, not just financially but emotionally. She had worked so hard to build a stable life after the chaos of her childhood. Let me see what we can do, Mr. Peterson said diplomatically. Maria, why don't you go get cleaned up? Mrs. Williams, please, let's sit down and discuss how we can make this right. But Mrs. Williams was not interested in sitting down. She was pacing now, her heels clicking angrily on the wooden floor. I don't want to discuss anything with her, she said, pointing at Maria. I want her gone. People like her shouldn't be working in a place like this anyway. People like her? Mr. Peterson's tone sharpened slightly. What exactly do you mean by that? Mrs. Williams paused, realizing she might have said too much. I mean people who can't handle the basic responsibilities of their job, she said quickly, but the damage was done. Several diners had heard the implication in her original words, and the atmosphere in the restaurant grew even more tense. Maria felt tears welling up in her eyes. She had faced discrimination before, but it never got easier. The combination of her panic attack, the accident, and now this confrontation was overwhelming her. She wanted to defend herself, to explain that she was having a panic attack triggered by Mrs. Williams' own behavior. But she couldn't find the words. I think there's been enough said, Mr. Peterson stated firmly. Maria, please go to my office. Mrs. Williams, I'll need you to calm down so we can address this properly. As Maria turned to leave, she heard Mrs. Williams mutter under her breath. Typical. Can't even take responsibility for their mistakes. Maria's steps faltered. Something about those words, combined with everything else that had happened, sparked a memory. A very specific memory from years ago. She turned back slowly, looking at Mrs. Williams more carefully. There was something familiar about her face, about the way she held herself when she was angry. Excuse me, Maria said quietly, her voice stronger now. Have we met before? You seem familiar. Mrs. Williams looked at her with obvious disdain. I seriously doubt that. I don't associate with. She stopped herself again, but Maria caught the look in her eyes. There was recognition there, and something else. Fear? Guilt? Maria's mind raced, trying to place where she had seen this woman before. It wasn't at the restaurant. This feeling was much older, much deeper. Mrs. Williams, Maria said slowly, what was your maiden name? The question seemed to hit Mrs. Williams like a slap. Her face went pale, and she took a step backward. That's none of your business, she said. But her voice had lost its confident edge. Maria's heart began to race for a different reason now. The pieces were starting to come together, and she didn't like what they were forming. Catherine Mitchell, she said, more to herself than to anyone else. Mrs. Williams' face went completely white. The restaurant around them seemed to fade away as the two women stared at each other. Years of suppressed memories came flooding back to Maria all at once. The foster home, the girl who had made her life miserable, the cruel taunts and deliberate exclusion. The way Catherine Mitchell had convinced the other kids that Maria was beneath them because of her background. You remember now, don't you? Maria said, her voice barely above a whisper. Mrs. Williams, Catherine Mitchell, looked around desperately, as if searching for an escape route. The other diners were watching with growing interest, sensing that something significant was happening, but not understanding what. I don't know what you're talking about, Catherine said. But her voice was shaking now. Sunny Meadows Group Home, Maria said clearly. You were there for 6 months when you were 15. Your parents sent you there after you were caught stealing from your private school. The mention of Sunny Meadows caused Catherine to sink back into her chair. Her hands moved protectively over her pregnant belly, and her breathing became rapid and shallow. Maria continued, the memories now flowing freely. You made my life hell during those 6 months. You convinced everyone that I was dirty, that I was stupid, that I didn't deserve to eat with the rest of you. You put salt in my food. You hid my clothes. You started rumors that I was diseased. Stop it, Catherine whispered. You told everyone that people like me would never amount to anything. That we were born to serve people like you. You said I would probably end up pregnant and on welfare before I was 18, just like my mother. The restaurant was dead silent now. Every patron was listening to this unexpected confrontation between the pregnant woman in designer clothes and the waitress in a simple black uniform. The dramatic reversal of power was evident to everyone watching. Mr. Peterson stood frozen, unsure how to handle this revelation. He could see that both women were deeply affected by whatever history they shared, but he couldn't imagine what connection a wealthy patron could have with one of his hardest-working employees. "I was just a kid," Catherine said desperately. "I didn't mean." "You meant every word," Maria said firmly. "You enjoyed making me feel worthless. You enjoyed having power over someone you saw as beneath you. And now here you are, 20 years later, treating me exactly the same way." Catherine's facade was crumbling completely now. The confident, entitled woman who had been berating Maria just minutes ago was gone, replaced by someone who looked genuinely terrified. She kept looking around the restaurant, clearly aware that everyone was watching and listening to every word. "What do you want from me?" Catherine asked quietly. Maria looked at her for a long moment, considering the question. What did she want? An apology? Revenge? Justice? The truth was, she had spent years in therapy learning to let go of the anger and hurt from her childhood. She had worked hard to build a life that wasn't defined by the cruelty she had experienced. "I want you to remember," Maria said finally. "I want you to remember what it felt like to have power over someone, and how you used it. And I want you to think about whether you want your child to grow up to be the kind of person you were." The words hung in the air between them. Catherine's hand moved unconsciously to her belly again, and Maria could see tears forming in her eyes. But before either woman could say another word, a commotion erupted near the restaurant's entrance. A man in an expensive suit came rushing through the door, his face flushed with panic and exertion. "Catherine," he called out. Scanning the restaurant frantically, Richard Williams stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. "I need to understand what happened to this Jessica person. If she's dangerous, if she's targeting my pregnant wife, I need to know everything." Catherine reached for his hand, but he stepped back. "Richard, please sit down. Let me explain." "No, Catherine. You've had 10 years to explain, and you chose to lie instead. Now someone is threatening you, threatening this waitress, and you're telling me it might be connected to some girl who tried to kill herself 20 years ago. I think I have a right to know exactly what role my wife played in that." The accusation hung heavy in the air. Other diners had given up pretending not to listen and were openly staring at their table. Mr. Peterson looked like he wanted to ask them to leave, but the drama was too intense to interrupt. Maria felt a knot forming in her stomach. She remembered Jessica Chun vividly now, a thin, quiet girl with sad eyes who never seemed to fit in anywhere. Jessica had been at Sunny Meadows because her parents couldn't handle her depression and anxiety. She wasn't a troublemaker like some of the other girls. She was just broken and desperately lonely. "Jessica was different from the rest of us," Maria began carefully. "She wasn't there because she'd gotten in trouble. Her parents sent her there because they didn't know how to deal with her mental health issues. She was weird," Catherine said bluntly, then immediately looked ashamed of her words. "I mean, she was very quiet and kept to herself. She didn't try to make friends with anyone. She didn't keep to herself by choice," Maria said, her voice gaining strength. "She was excluded. Deliberately. Some of the girls made her life miserable." Richard sat back down, but his posture remained tense. "What exactly did these girls do to her?" Catherine squirmed in her seat. "It wasn't that bad. Just typical teenage stuff. Pranks, you know." Maria stared at her in disbelief. "Pranks?" "Catherine, they put glass in her shoes. They convinced her roommate to request a transfer because Jessica supposedly had contagious skin problems. They started rumors that she was a lesbian and a devil worshiper." "I didn't do all of those things," Catherine protested weakly. "No, but you were the ringleader," Maria shot back. "You organized most of it. You were the one who convinced everyone that Jessica was beneath them, that she deserved to be treated like an outcast." Patricia gasped. "Catherine, you participated in bullying a depressed girl? That's awful." "I was 15 years old," Catherine said defensively. "I was angry about being sent away from home. I was taking it out on someone who couldn't fight back. I know it was wrong, but I was just a kid." "So was Jessica," Maria said firmly. "And she tried to kill herself because of what you and the others did to her. The first time, She took a bunch of pills from the nurse's office. The second time, she tried to hang herself in the shower. Richard's face had gone pale. My God, Catherine, you were involved in bullying someone to the point of suicide attempts. It wasn't just me, Catherine said desperately. Other girls were involved too. And Jessica had problems before she came to Sunny Meadows. Her depression wasn't our fault. But you made it worse, Maria said. You took someone who was already struggling, and you made her life hell for sport. The silence that followed was deafening. Catherine sat with tears streaming down her face, finally, confronting the reality of what she had done 20 years ago. Richard looked at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. Patricia seemed shocked and uncomfortable. Mr. Peterson checked his watch, clearly wishing this conversation would move somewhere else. What happened to Jessica after Sunny Meadows? Richard asked quietly. I don't know, Catherine admitted. When my 6 months were up, my parents came to get me. I never saw any of the other girls again. I tried to forget that whole period of my life. Maria pulled out her phone and began searching online. Jessica Chun, Sunny Meadows. She muttered, typing. After a few minutes, her face grew serious. What did you find? Patricia asked. There's a Jessica Chun who works as a private investigator here in the city, Maria said slowly. She specializes in background checks and finding people who don't want to be found. Her bio says she overcame a difficult childhood and now helps others seek justice for past wrongs. Richard leaned forward. Show me. Maria turned her phone so everyone could see the website. The photo showed a woman in her mid-30s with short dark hair and intense eyes. She looked professional and confident, nothing like the broken teenager they remembered. That's her, Catherine whispered. She looks so different, but that's definitely Jessica. So she's become a private investigator who specializes in exposing people's secrets, Richard said grimly. And now she's using those skills to get revenge on the girls who tormented her. Catherine's phone buzzed with a new text message. She read it aloud with shaking hands. I see you figured out who I am. Good. It's time for both of you to understand what real consequences feel like. The meeting location has changed. Come to the old Sunny Meadows building at 8 p.m. tonight. Both of you. The building is still there? Maria asked, surprised. It was turned into apartments a few years ago, Catherine said. But the basement levels are still empty. I drive by there sometimes, just to remind myself. To remind yourself of what? Richard asked. Of who I used to be. Of what I'm capable of when I'm angry and hurt. Catherine looked at her husband with pleading eyes. Richard, I'm not that person anymore. I've tried so hard to be better, to be worthy of the life we've built together. By lying about your past for 10 years? Because I was ashamed. Because I knew if you found out what I'd done, what kind of person I'd been, you would never have married me. Richard stood up again, running his hands through his hair. I need some air. This is a lot to process. He walked outside, leaving Catherine sitting with Maria, Patricia, and Mr. Peterson. The restaurant had mostly emptied out during their confrontation, with other diners finishing their meals quickly and leaving to escape the drama. I should go talk to him, Patricia said gently. Try to help him understand. She followed Richard outside, leaving Catherine and Maria alone with the restaurant manager, who was clearly hoping they would also leave soon. I'm sorry, Catherine said quietly to Maria, for what I did to you at Sunny Meadows, and for dragging you into this mess today. Maria studied Catherine's face, looking for signs of sincerity. She saw fear, regret, and genuine remorse. But she also saw the same person who had spilled wine on her, and immediately demanded she be fired. Are you sorry for what you did 20 years ago, or are you sorry that it's caught up with you? Maria asked bluntly. Catherine considered the question seriously. Both, I think. When I was young, I told myself that what I did didn't matter because we were all just kids. But, seeing Jessica's message, realizing she's been planning this, it makes me understand that my actions had lasting consequences I never considered. Jessica tried to kill herself because of what you did. I know, and I have to live with that. But, Maria, I've spent 20 years trying to be a better person. I volunteer with charities, I donate money to help troubled teens, I've tried to make amends. Have you though? Maria challenged. Because from what I saw today, before all this started, you were treating me exactly the same way you treated Jessica. You were dismissive, condescending, and cruel. You demanded I be fired for an honest mistake. Catherine's face crumpled. You're right. God, you're absolutely right. I thought I'd changed, but when I was angry, when I felt like someone was beneath me, she trailed off, recognizing the ugly truth about herself. You reverted to being the same person you were at 15, Maria finished. Which means you never really changed at all. You just got better at hiding it. The words hit Catherine like a physical blow. She doubled over slightly, one hand on her pregnant belly, as if protecting her unborn child from the truth about their mother. What kind of person am I going to be as a mother? Catherine asked, more to herself than to Maria. How can I raise a child to be kind and compassionate when I'm still capable of such cruelty? Maria felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. She had spent years in therapy dealing with the trauma from her childhood, including the trauma Catherine had inflicted. She had learned that healing required confronting hard truths about herself and others. The fact that you're asking that question is a start, Maria said. But, Catherine, you can't just be sorry because you got caught. You have to actually change your behavior, especially toward people you see as having less power than you. I know. You're right. I don't know how to face Richard now. Our entire marriage is built on lies. Not lies, Maria corrected. Omissions. There's a difference. You didn't tell him about your past because you were ashamed. That's not the same as actively deceiving him. Catherine looked up hopefully. Do you think he'll be able to forgive me? I don't know your husband, but if he loves you, he'll want to work through this. The question is whether you're willing to do the work. What do you mean? I mean really changing. Not just feeling sorry, but actually becoming the person you want to be. It takes effort, Catherine. It takes therapy and self-reflection and catching yourself every time you start to treat someone badly because you think they're beneath you. Catherine nodded slowly. Like I did with you today. Exactly like you did with me today. They sat in silence for a moment, processing the weight of their conversation. Outside, they could see Richard pacing on the sidewalk while Patricia talked to him. What about Jessica? Catherine asked. What does she want from us? I think she wants us to face what we did. You especially. She wants you to understand how your actions affected her. By blackmailing us. By threatening to destroy our lives. By making you experience the powerlessness she felt, Maria said. Think about it, Catherine. You have everything, a loving husband, financial security, social status, a baby on the way. You built all of that by hiding the worst parts of yourself. Jessica wants to take that security away from you, the way you took her sense of safety away from her. Catherine's phone buzzed again. Another message from Jessica. I've been watching both of you for months. Catherine, I know about your charity work. Very convenient way to absolve yourself of guilt. Maria, I know about your mother's medical bills and your financial struggles. Different paths, same starting point. Tonight you'll both understand what justice feels like. She's been watching us for months, Maria said, reading the message over Catherine's shoulder. This isn't a sudden impulse. She's been planning this carefully. What do we do? Catherine asked desperately. Do we go to the meeting? Do we call the police? Do we just ignore her and hope she goes away? Before Maria could answer, Richard and Patricia came back into the restaurant. Richard's face was set in hard lines, but he sat down next to his wife. I've been thinking, he said quietly, about what you told me about your past. I'm hurt that you lied to me, Catherine. I'm angry that you didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. But I'm not giving up on our marriage. Catherine's face showed relief and gratitude. Thank you. Richard, I swear I'll tell you everything. No more secrets. That's going to have to start now, Richard said firmly. Because we need to decide how to handle this Jessica situation, and I need to know exactly what we're dealing with. We could go to the police, Patricia suggested. This is clearly extortion. But what if she follows through on her threats? Catherine asked. What if she exposes everything to the newspapers? My charity work, our social circle, your business reputation. Let her, Richard said, surprising everyone. Catherine, if you're really committed to changing, to being honest, then we face this head on. We don't let someone blackmail us into hiding the truth. But the humiliation will be temporary. But if we give in to blackmail, it never ends. She'll always have power over us. Maria found herself admiring Richard's strength and moral clarity. He's right, she told Catherine. And, besides, I think Jessica wants more than money or silence. I think she wants acknowledgement of what you did to her. You mean she wants me to apologize? I mean she wants you to really understand the consequences of your actions, to feel what she felt. Catherine looked terrified at the prospect. What if we go to this meeting and she tries to hurt us? What if she's not stable? Then we bring backup, Richard said decisively. We go, but we don't go alone. And we bring our phones and record everything. I have a better idea, Maria said slowly, an idea forming in her mind. What if we go to the police, but not to press charges? What if we ask them to help us arrange a meeting where Jessica can say what she needs to say, but in a safe environment? You mean like mediation? Patricia asked. Something like that. Jessica clearly has things she needs to get out. She's been carrying this anger and hurt for 20 years. Maybe what she really needs is for Catherine to listen to her, to truly understand the impact of what happened. Catherine looked uncertain. You think she just wants me to hear her side of things? I think she wants validation that what happened to her mattered, that her pain was real and acknowledged. And I think she wants to see that you've become someone who's capable of taking responsibility for your actions. Detective Sarah Martinez set down her coffee and looked across the table at the unusual group assembled in the police station's family conference room. In her 15 years with the force, she had seen plenty of domestic disputes and harassment cases, but this situation was unique. A successful businesswoman and her husband, a waitress, and a charity volunteer were asking for help mediating a confrontation with someone from their shared past. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, Detective Martinez said, reviewing her notes. You all want to arrange a supervised meeting with someone who's been stalking and blackmailing two of you, because you believe this person was traumatized by bullying incidents 20 years ago. That's right, Richard confirmed. My wife was one of the girls who participated in bullying Jessica Chun at a group home when they were teenagers. Now Jessica is a private investigator who's been gathering information about Catherine for months, and today she started making threats. Detective Martinez looked at Catherine, who sat with her hands folded over her pregnant belly, her face pale and drawn. Mrs. Williams, can you tell me more about these bullying incidents? Catherine's voice was barely audible. We made her life miserable. I made her life miserable. We excluded her from activities, spread rumors about her, put things in her food, destroyed her belongings. She tried to kill herself twice while we were there. And you, Miss Santos? The detective turned to Maria. What was your role in this? I was a victim too, sometimes, Maria said honestly. But I also stood by and watched Catherine torment Jessica without doing anything to stop it. I was too focused on not becoming a target myself. Detective Martinez made more notes. And now Miss Chun is demanding that you meet her at the old group home building tonight? Yes, Catherine said. She wants both Maria and me there at 8 o'clock. She said it's time for us to understand what real consequences feel like. That's not a meeting, Detective Martinez said firmly. That's a trap. Meeting someone who's been making threats in an isolated location? Absolutely not. But what if she follows through on her blackmail threats? Catherine asked desperately. What if she exposes everything to the media? Mrs. Williams, you can't let fear of embarrassment put you in physical danger. You're 7 months pregnant. This Jessica Chun has demonstrated that she's unstable and potentially dangerous. Richard leaned forward. Detective, what if we could arrange a meeting here at the police station? Supervised, recorded, with officers present? That way Catherine could face Jessica safely, and maybe they could work through whatever Jessica needs to say. Detective Martinez considered this. It's unusual, but not impossible. The question is whether Ms. Chun would agree to it. People who make threats usually want to maintain control of the situation. Let me call her, Maria said. Jessica included her phone number in one of the text messages. Maybe I can convince her that a supervised meeting would be better than whatever she has planned for tonight. Catherine has been living a lie. But, Jessica, you've built a successful career. You've overcome so much. Why risk throwing that away for revenge? Because she needs to face what she did. Jessica's voice grew harder. She needs to feel as powerless and humiliated as she made me feel. Do you know what it's like to be 15 years old and so desperate to escape the pain that you try to end your own life? Catherine started crying quietly. Detective Martinez watched her carefully, noting her genuine distress. I can't imagine, Maria said honestly. But, Jessica, There are other ways to get the acknowledgement you deserve. Catherine is here with me right now, along with her husband and a police detective. She's ready to face what she did, but we want to do it safely. A police detective? Jessica's voice sharpened. You're treating me like a criminal. You've been stalking and blackmailing us, Maria pointed out gently. That is criminal behavior, even if you feel justified in doing it. Another long pause. You're right. I suppose I have crossed some lines. But, Maria, you have to understand. I've carried this pain for 20 years. I've been in therapy, I've tried to move on, but seeing Catherine living her perfect life while I struggled with depression and PTSD, it felt like such an injustice. Detective Martinez gestured for Maria to suggest the supervised meeting. Jessica, what if Catherine could acknowledge what she did to you in a formal way? Here at the police station, recorded, with witnesses? You could say everything you need to say to her, and she would have to listen and respond honestly. Would she actually take responsibility? Or would she just make excuses and try to minimize what she did? Catherine suddenly leaned toward the phone. Jessica, it's me. I'm here. The silence stretched for almost a minute. Catherine Mitchell, Jessica said finally. You sound different than you did when we were 15. I am different. Or at least, I thought I was. But today I realized that I still have the capacity for the same cruelty I showed you back then. I treated Maria badly today before any of this started, for the exact same reasons I treated you badly 20 years ago. And what reasons were those? Because I was angry and hurting, and I took it out on someone I saw as having less power than me. Because it made me feel better about my own problems to make someone else feel worse. Detective Martinez raised her eyebrows, impressed by Catherine's honesty. That's the first real truth you've told, Jessica said. But, Catherine, do you understand what your actions cost me? Do you understand that I've never had a normal relationship because I can't trust people? That I chose my career specifically so I could have power over others instead of being vulnerable? That I've spent tens of thousands of dollars on therapy trying to undo the damage you did to my ability to trust? No, Catherine said quietly. I didn't understand any of that. I told myself that we were all just kids, that it wasn't that serious, that you would get over it. I was wrong. I attempted suicide twice because of what you and the others did to me. The second time, I almost succeeded. I was in the hospital for a week, and when I came back to Sunny Meadows, you acted like nothing had happened. I was scared, Catherine admitted. I was scared of how serious it had become, and I didn't know how to face what I had done, so I pretended it wasn't my fault. Richard reached over and took Catherine's hand, offering silent support as she confronted these painful truths. Jessica, Detective Martinez interjected. This is Detective Martinez with the city police. I can hear that you have legitimate grievances that need to be addressed. But the stalking and blackmail have to stop. Will you consider coming in for a supervised conversation where these issues can be discussed safely? What would happen to me legally? I know I've committed crimes. That depends on several factors, including whether Mrs. Williams wants to press charges and how you handle this situation going forward. If you cooperate and participate in a constructive resolution, that would be viewed favorably. Jessica was quiet for a long time. I don't want to go to jail. I just wanted Catherine to understand. Then, come in, Maria urged. Face to face, with witnesses, where she can't run away or make excuses. Make her really listen to you. When? Tonight, Detective Martinez said. We can arrange it for 7 o'clock, here at the station. You'll both have a chance to speak, and we'll make sure it stays civil and productive. And the blackmail material? The information I've gathered about Catherine's life? We'll need you to turn that over, Detective Martinez said firmly. All of it. No copies, no backups. Agreed. But I want Maria there too. She was part of what happened, even if she wasn't the ringleader. Maria nodded. I'll be there. I need to face this too. After Jessica hung up, the group sat in silence for a moment, processing what had just happened. Do you think she'll actually show up? Patricia asked. I think so, Detective Martinez said. She's been planning this confrontation for years. She won't want to give up the chance to have her say, especially with witnesses and official documentation. What happens during this meeting? Richard asked. What's the format? We'll start by laying out ground rules. No shouting, no personal attacks, no threats. Jessica will have a chance to explain how the bullying affected her. Catherine will have a chance to respond and apologize. Maria can contribute her perspective. Then, we'll discuss how to move forward constructively. And if Catherine isn't satisfied with Catherine's response, that's the risk we're all taking, Detective Martinez said. But the alternative is letting this escalate further, which could put everyone in danger. Catherine spoke up. I want to do this. I need to face Jessica and really listen to what she has to say. Even if it's painful, even if it changes how people see me. Are you sure? Richard asked. Once you acknowledge this publicly, there's no taking it back. I know. But Maria was right earlier. I can't keep being sorry without actually changing. And I can't change if I don't fully understand the impact of my actions. Detective Martinez stood up. All right then. We'll reconvene at 7 o'clock tonight. Mrs. Williams, I suggest you spend the next few hours thinking carefully about what you want to say to Jessica. This may be your only chance to make this right. As the group prepared to leave, Maria felt a mixture of anxiety and hope. In a few hours, she would face Jessica Chun for the first time in 20 years. She would have to acknowledge her own role in Jessica's trauma, even though it was primarily one of inaction rather than active cruelty. But, more importantly, Catherine would have to prove that her apologies were genuine and that she was truly capable of change. Jessica had spent 20 years waiting for this moment of accountability. Whether it would provide the closure she needed or whether it would only deepen her anger remained to be seen. Outside the police station, Catherine turned to Maria. Then at exactly 7 o'clock, Jessica Chun walked into the police station conference room. She looked nothing like the broken 15-year-old girl that Catherine and Maria remembered. At 35, Jessica was composed and professional, wearing a crisp business suit and carrying herself with quiet confidence. But her eyes held the same wariness that had been there 20 years ago, and her jaw was set with determination. Detective Martinez made the introductions and explained the ground rules. This is a voluntary mediation session, she began. Everyone here has agreed to participate in an honest discussion about events that occurred 20 years ago and their lasting impact. The session is being recorded for legal purposes. Jessica sat across from Catherine and Maria, her hands folded on the table. For a moment, the three women just looked at each other, each seeing reflections of their teenage selves in the faces before them. Jessica, Detective Martinez said, you requested this meeting. Would you like to begin by explaining why this confrontation was important to you? Jessica took a deep breath. 20 years ago, I was sent to Sunny Meadows group home because my parents couldn't handle my depression and anxiety. I wasn't a bad kid. I hadn't gotten in trouble with the law or with drugs. I was just sad and scared and struggling with mental health issues that my family didn't understand. She looked directly at Catherine. When you arrived at Sunny Meadows, I actually felt hopeful. You were clearly from a wealthy family, well-educated, articulate. I thought maybe you would be different from some of the other girls who had been cruel to me. Catherine shifted uncomfortably in her chair, but maintained eye contact. Instead, Jessica continued, you quickly established yourself as the leader among the residents, and you decided that I would be your primary target. Within a week of your arrival, you had convinced most of the other girls that I was weird, dirty, and contagious. Catherine started to interrupt. Please let me finish, Jessica said firmly. I've waited 20 years to say this. Detective Martinez nodded for Jessica to continue. You organized campaigns of psychological torture disguised as pranks. You put salt and pepper in my food until I couldn't eat without getting sick. You convinced my roommate that I had lice and skin diseases, so she requested a transfer. You started rumors that I was a lesbian and a Satan worshiper. You hid my clothes and personal belongings. You made sure I was excluded from every group activity. Jessica's voice remained steady, but her hands were trembling slightly. But the worst part wasn't the pranks or the rumors. The worst part was how you made me feel about myself. You convinced me that I was worthless, that I deserved to be treated badly, that even my own parents were right to send me away because I was too broken to be loved. Catherine's eyes were filling with tears, but she continued to listen. After 3 months of this treatment, I took 30 sleeping pills from the nurse's office. I wanted to die rather than face another day of humiliation. I spent 4 days in the hospital, and when I came back, nothing changed. If anything, It got worse because now everyone knew I was crazy enough to try suicide. Maria spoke quietly. Jessica, I'm so sorry I didn't try to stop what was happening to you. You were trying to survive too, Jessica acknowledged. Catherine made it clear that anyone who defended me would become a target themselves. But, Maria, you could have told the staff what was really happening. You could have found ways to show me some kindness when Catherine wasn't watching. You're right. I should have done something. Jessica turned back to Catherine. 2 months after my first suicide attempt, you convinced several girls to flood the bathroom while I was showering. Then, you all left me there naked and shivering while you went to dinner. That night, I tried to hang myself with a bedsheet. I would have died if my new roommate hadn't come back early from the evening activity. The room was silent except for the quiet hum of the recording equipment. Catherine was crying openly now, but Jessica wasn't finished. Do you know what it's like to be 15 years old and so desperate to escape emotional pain that you're willing to die? Do you know what it's like to wake up in a hospital and feel disappointed that you're still alive? No, Catherine whispered. I don't. I spent 6 weeks in a psychiatric hospital after that. When I was finally released, my parents decided they couldn't handle me anymore. I went to a different group home, then to foster care, then aged out of the system at 18 with no family support and severe PTSD. Jessica's voice grew stronger. But I survived. I got my GED, then community college, then a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. I became a private investigator because I wanted to help people find the truth when others try to hide it. I specialized in background checks and finding people who didn't want to be found because I understood what it felt like to be powerless. She looked around the table. I've been successful in my career. I own my own business. I have a nice apartment. I've even managed to have a few relationships, though none that lasted because I still struggle with trust issues. Detective Martinez interjected gently. Jessica, can you explain what motivated you to track down Catherine after all these years? 3 years ago, I was hired by a client to investigate some charity fraud. During that investigation, I came across Catherine's name in connection with several high-profile charity events. I recognized her immediately, even after all these years. Jessica pulled out a tablet and showed them a photo from a charity gala. Catherine was smiling, wearing an expensive gown, surrounded by other wealthy donors. Seeing her there, looking so successful and happy, triggered something in me. All the anger and hurt I thought I had processed came flooding back. So you decided to investigate her? At first, I just wanted to know what kind of person she had become. Had she changed? Was she genuinely committed to helping others? Or was the charity work just about social status? So I started gathering information about her life. What did you find? I found a woman who had built her entire adult life on lies. She told everyone she went to boarding school in Switzerland when she was actually at Sunny Meadows for theft. She never mentioned her time in foster care to her husband or friends. She was living a completely fabricated version of her past. Catherine spoke up. I was ashamed of what I had done. I thought if I could just leave it behind, become a better person. But you didn't become a better person, Jessica said sharply. I've been observing you for months, Catherine. I've seen how you treat service workers, how you talk to people you consider beneath you. You're still the same entitled, cruel person you were at 15. You've just learned to hide it better. That's not true, Richard protested. Catherine does charitable work. She volunteers. She does charity work with people who can enhance her social status, Jessica corrected. But watch how she treats a waitress when she's angry, or a store clerk who can't find what she wants, or a parking attendant who tells her she can't park somewhere. The mask comes off pretty quickly. Maria nodded reluctantly. She's right. Before all this started today, Catherine was cruel to me over an honest mistake. She immediately demanded I be fired and made comments about people like me not belonging in a restaurant like that. Catherine looked stricken. Jessica, I understand your anger and your sense of injustice. But help me understand what you hope to accomplish with the stalking and blackmail. What was your end goal? Jessica was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, I wanted her to suffer the way I suffered. I wanted to destroy her perfect life the way she destroyed my sense of self-worth. I wanted her to feel powerless and humiliated. And now, after hearing her acknowledge what she did and seeing her genuine remorse, Jessica looked at Catherine, studying her face carefully. I can see that her regret is real. But I'm not sure if she truly understands the scope of the damage she caused, or if she's just sorry she got caught. Catherine leaned forward. Jessica, what can I do to show you that I understand? What can I do to make amends for what I put you through? I don't know if you can, Jessica said honestly. The damage is done. I can't get back the years I spent hating myself because of what you did. I can't undo the failed relationships or the therapy bills or the nights I spent wanting to die. But what about going forward? Maria asked. What would it look like for both of you to move past this in a healthy way? Jessica considered the question. Catherine would need to face consequences for her actions. Real consequences, not just private apologies. What kind of consequences? Detective Martinez asked. She would need to publicly acknowledge what she did. Not just to us, but to her social circle, her charity friends, her husband's business associates. She would need to be honest about her past and take responsibility for the harm she caused. Catherine went pale. Jessica, that would destroy everything I've built. My reputation, my husband's business, my standing in the community. Now you understand how I felt when you destroyed my sense of self-worth. Jessica said firmly. The difference is that I was an innocent victim. You're facing consequences for your own actions. Richard spoke up. Catherine, Jessica is right. If you're serious about change, about accountability, then you need to be willing to face public consequences for what you did. But what about the baby? Catherine asked desperately. What about our family? What about the family I never got to have because I was too damaged by what you did to maintain healthy relationships? Jessica shot back. The room fell silent again. The weight of 20 years of pain and consequences hung heavy in the air. Detective Martinez tried to steer the conversation toward resolution. Jessica, if Catherine were to make this public acknowledgement, if she were to face these consequences, would you be able to move forward? Would you be able to stop the stalking and threats? Yes, Jessica said without hesitation. I don't want to hurt her physically or destroy her marriage. I just want her to face the truth publicly and understand that actions have lasting consequences. And, Catherine, the detective asked, are you willing to do what Jessica is asking? Catherine was quiet for a long time, clearly wrestling with the decision. Richard took her hand and squeezed it gently. If I do this, Catherine said finally, if I publicly acknowledge my past and what I did to you, will you help me understand how to genuinely change? How to become the person I should have been all along? Jessica looked surprised by the request. You want my help? You've overcome incredible trauma and built a successful life. You understand the impact of cruelty in a way I never have. If I'm going to truly change, if I'm going to be a good mother to this baby, I need to understand how to treat people with kindness and respect, especially people who are vulnerable. You're asking your victim to help you become a better person? For 20 years, I've seen Catherine as an enemy, as someone who destroyed part of my life. The idea of helping her become a better person, it's a lot to process. That's fair, Catherine said. I know I'm asking a lot. But, Jessica, if you can find a way to help me change, truly change, then maybe something positive can come from all this pain. What would that look like practically? Richard asked. Jessica thought for a moment. If Catherine is serious about this, she could start by writing a detailed letter of apology, acknowledging everything she did, and taking full responsibility. Then, she could publish it in the local newspaper as an open letter. And after that, we could meet regularly. Catherine could volunteer with organizations that help teens with mental health issues. She could use her experience to educate others about the lasting impact of bullying. She could turn her past cruelty into present-day advocacy. Catherine nodded eagerly. Yes, I want to do all of that. I want to make sure my story helps prevent other kids from going through what you went through. And I want oversight, Jessica added. I want to see evidence that you're actually changing, not just putting on another mask for public consumption. You'll have it, Catherine promised. Complete transparency. Detective Martinez looked around the table. Are we all in agreement then? Catherine will publicly acknowledge her past actions and their impact. Jessica will help guide Catherine's efforts to change and make amends. And both of you will work together to ensure this kind of harm doesn't happen to other young people. Everyone nodded. Then, let's make it official, the detective said, pulling out some paperwork. We'll document this agreement and the terms we've discussed. Jessica, thank you for helping arrange this. You could have just walked away from the whole situation. Maybe I should have done something 20 years ago instead of just watching, Maria replied. Maybe if I had spoken up or gotten help, Jessica wouldn't have suffered as much as she did. We can't change the past, Richard said. But we can try to do better going forward. As they parted ways to prepare for the evening's confrontation, none of them could predict how dramatically the events at Sunny Meadows 20 years ago would continue to reverberate through their lives. Jessica Chun had spent 2 decades planning her revenge, and in a few hours, she would finally get her chance to make Catherine Williams understand the true cost of cruelty. But what Jessica didn't know was that her quest for justice would ultimately force all 3 women to confront not just their shared past, but the people they had become in the years since. The meeting at the police station would reveal truths about forgiveness, accountability, and redemption that none of them were prepared to face. Richard nodded approvingly. That sounds like the right approach. But we do it safely, with professional oversight. As they discussed the logistics of arranging such a meeting, Maria felt a strange sense of hope. For the first time in 20 years, there was a chance that the trauma from Sunny Meadows could be addressed honestly and openly. It wouldn't erase what had happened, but it might finally allow all 3 women to move forward. But as Maria looked at Catherine, really looked at her, she wondered if the entitled woman who had demanded her firing just hours earlier was truly capable of the kind of accountability Jessica was seeking. The next few hours would reveal whether Catherine Williams had truly changed, or whether she was still the same cruel teenager who had driven a vulnerable girl to desperation. Why? Catherine, where are you? I got your message about an emergency. Catherine looked confused. Richard, what are you talking about? I didn't send you any message. The man, obviously her husband, rushed to her side, taking in her wine-stained dress and distressed appearance. Someone called my office and said you were having complications with the pregnancy. They said you were at the hospital and asking for me. That's impossible, Catherine said, but her voice was uncertain now. I've been here the whole time. I was just having lunch and... She trailed off, looking around the restaurant with growing confusion. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And as the pieces began to fall into place, both Catherine and Maria realized that the day's events were far from over. "NK, think what?" Richard interrupted. "Who's Jessica Chun?" Catherine and Maria exchanged looks. They both remembered Jessica, the quiet girl who had been blamed for things she didn't do, who had been the scapegoat for the other girls' problems, including problems that Catherine had caused. Jessica was another girl at the group home, Catherine said quietly. She had a hard time there. That's putting it mildly, Maria said, her voice hard. She was tormented by some of the other girls. She tried to kill herself twice while she was there. The weight of this revelation settled over the table. If Jessica Chun was behind the blackmail, then this wasn't just about money or exposure. This was about revenge for trauma that had lasting consequences. And as Maria thought about it more, she realized that if Jessica was seeking revenge, the day's events were probably just the beginning.